Here's what I ask. Can somebody tell me one of their resolutions for 2021? One of the goals they have, if it's not a resolution, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this. I'm going to share some examples, and I'll try and tie it back to your example as to avoid domain dependence, right? So I'm not just going to share all money goals or fitness goals or whatever. If you could tell me here in the Zoom, you could tell me one of your resolutions, one of your goals. I will use that as an example as we're going through this so you can see how I choose to process these things. I love it. I don't make resolutions, me neither, and you're going to see why. So if you're cool, that would be awesome. Drop it in. I will tailor, if you're on the Zoom and you tell me what your goals are, I will do my best to tailor this training to you as we're going through it. Okay. Locate and purchase 6 units for rentals. That's helpful. Can you tell me how many you have, if you're comfortable sharing that? Because we always got to start where we're at, right? You're going to see me obviously look down at my computer from time to time, make sure that the right thing is being shared, and checking the chat here. So you have 8 and you're like 6. Cool. So here we go. How I modify behavior, or how I build behavior modification programs. So what this is this is how I modify my behavior when I want to achieve something. I also build all of my programs this way. Right? So a lot of people come in and say, what should I do? And I say, it depends. And they throw information at me and say, hey, just do this. And then next week we'll touch base and we'll take the next step. There's a reason I don't draw out a step-by-step, 5-year plan. It's really, really important. Finish all my SOPs. All right, cool. Yeah. This is a behavior modification plan. I'm going to lean heavy on NixMiss. So if you didn't see NixMiss, you can go back there for some of the core concepts. Okay. Remember, we got to make room for a belief before we give somebody another one. It's a NixMiss concept, but we have to make room for something before we try to stuff something else in there. So I'm going to go through this systematically here. You ready? Cool. Just checking the Zoom here, seeing what people are saying so I can help them. All right. So a lot of these goals that are coming in are fairly arbitrary seeming. They may not be, but we'll walk through all that. Okay, now remember, humans are aiming creatures. This is from NixMiss. I'm not going to deep dive on it. Go to nixmiss2020.com. You get all the training. It's like 12 hours of the operating system, the shared language, pulled from computer science, biology, all these things. Remember that we circumnavigate. So we're here, and humans need something to aim for. And what we do is we over-rotate. We get too rigid, and then we panic, and we go into chaos, and so on and so forth, right? We vacillate between rigidity and chaos. We don't have boundaries, and then we set them, but we set them too strict, and then we panic, and then we remove them again, right? So we circumnavigate, kind of like we spiral towards our destination. It's never a straight line. So you have to remember that. We're always circumnavigating, and we have to allow for that circumnavigation. We don't just get better and better and better, right? If you look at somebody that's lost weight, it's still, right, there's still some volatility. It's not just a straight line. You look at somebody that makes money, volatility. Look at the market, there's volatility, right? It's not a straight line. There's a circumnavigation to go from here to here, right? But there's going to be ebbs and flows. So we have to understand that. We cannot assume a straight line. Google Map, you got to start where you're at. So you think of Google Maps. This is the biggest reason people fail to reach their goals. You have to start where you're at, which means, okay, you know what? I haven't exercised in 10 years. I'm going to start tomorrow 5 days a week. It's a ridiculous place to start because it's not where you're at, right? We got to live in reality. If Google Maps tells us to start somewhere other than where we're at, we go, wow, this is useless, right? Any plan that starts you anywhere other than where you're at, we should look at the same way and go, wow, this is not useful to me. Okay, so we're going to start where we're at. Again, I break that down really heavily in NixMiss. In system reliability, we get the biggest gains by raising the floor. So our average performance in anything we do is somewhere between our ceiling and our floor. Most people, when they set resolutions, they're going, I'm going to do better than my best, which is by definition really hard to do because the best you've ever done is the best there's evidence that you could do. However, the biggest gains is in raising the floor, right? Just doing better than your worst. You know, that day where you binge ate like 12 pizzas, just get rid of that day. Or that day where, you know, you're on this really strict budget, but then you went crazy and spent $100,000. Eliminate that day and the average improves. So we're trying to raise the floor, right? That's the circumnavigation. Now, if there's a huge gap between your best day and your worst day, we have to focus entirely on raising the floor. Once the floor and the ceiling are almost the same, meaning your best day and your worst day look very similar, we can focus on raising the ceiling, okay? I'm zooming through this because I just spent 12 days teaching all this. nicksmith2020.com. If you want to get those 12 days, it's about 15 hours if you include the panel of experts, which was a phenomenal panel. People that, you know, most of us will never have a chance to be in a room with. So go to nicksmith2020.com if you want a deeper dive on everything I just introduced. Okay. Now, if you read my book, Bumpers, here's one of my non-negotiables, especially when it comes to resolutions and lifestyle change. I will not start something I'm not willing to do forever. I kind of got to share this as a foundation. I didn't share it in Nick Smith's, but here's why. I will not start something if I'm not willing to do it forever. Because let's say I want to go on a diet, overweight, want to go on a diet. I use fitness a lot as an example. And so I say, okay, I'm going to eat only salad and drink water, something crazy like that. The question is, am I willing to do that forever? And the answer is probably a resounding no, which is appropriate. The problem with this is why so many people might even hit their resolutions and not get to where they want to be long term. Because if I'm not willing to do it forever, and I know that right up front, any benefit that comes from eating only salad and drinking water is fragile. It's going to go away because I am not willing to continue to do this forever. So even if I am successful, check off the box, haha, I did it, New Year's resolution complete. It's only a matter of time before I fall back into previous behaviors, right? Because there was no behavior modification. There was just strict rules, which means I either go back to what I was doing or I keep eating salads. I don't know the middle ground. I never experimented in the middle ground. You don't have to do it forever. But if you start something you are not willing to do forever, then you have to understand it is a countdown to doomsday. The benefits will not stick with you forever because you're not willing to do the behavior forever. You may decide not to, and that's perfectly fine. I start a lot of things I don't continue, but I don't start it unless I'm willing to do it forever if it's important to me for that reason. Does that make sense? Just drop in the chat. It's weird because people have all these short-term things and I want to lose 30 pounds. But if you do it in a way you're not willing to sustain, then it's very likely to come back. So what's the point? We're just checking off boxes, but we're not really improving our life over a long period of time, right? That's called yo-yo dieting. We do it in every aspect of our life. Just people talk about yo-yo dieting, but we do yo-yo budgeting. We do yo-yo marketing. We do yo-yo sales, yo-yo relationship stuff. Like, okay, fine. I'm going to improve my relationship by doing this, this, this. If you're not willing to do that forever, you're just kicking the can down the road till you don't want to do it anymore. Boom. Ticking time bomb. Okay. Let me know if that makes sense. Here's the biggest takeaway. Here's the thing that I implore you to think about if you actually want your life to get better over a long period of time. Your maximum achievability is not your maximum maintainability. I do believe you could lose 30 pounds in this time frame or get to $100,000 a month. However, if we're not thinking about maintainability, this is the one-hit wonder, right? These are the people that exploit too soon. They sell their souls. They get a picture of them like looking super shredded on the beach, and then they're afraid to be seen in public because they never look like that again. Okay, your maximum achievability, what you could achieve right now over the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months is not the same as what you can maintain or sustain. People say all the time, I have a marketing problem. I have a sales problem. I have a weight loss problem. And we can look at their history and say, no, look, you made money here. You made a lot of sales here. You made a lot of sales here. You lost a lot of weight here. You don't have a marketing problem or a sales problem or a weight loss problem. You have a maintainability problem. Very different things, right? So everybody's trying to solve the wrong problem. They're trying to say, I don't know how to lose weight. Well, you do know how to lose weight. Stop eating. What you don't know how to do is lose weight in a sustainable way, right? By adopting behaviors you can maintain over a long period of time. So when I do this in fitness, nutrition, business now, and now with really, really high level clients, I've had some worked with Florida Department of Health, the head of endocrinology at Johns Hopkins, stuff like that, for this reason, okay? Because of this model, it's different than being right. It's modifying behavior, okay? Let me know if that makes sense. Maximum achievability is not your maximum maintainability. Here's the other concept that you need to understand. It's called the science of hindsight. The science of hindsight. I adopted this from one of my best friends, former business partner, Dr. Trevor Kashey. This is the Google Maps. This is how we get clear in our current position. So the science of hindsight is, I don't know what's going to happen, but we could probably figure out what has happened. Okay? It's looking back at our actual behavior. So if you said, how many days a week should I work out? How many sales calls should I take? I need to take more sales calls. What should my target be? We can make up all kinds of arbitrary numbers. That's like Google Maps giving you a random ass direction to start. The appropriate thing to do is be like, well, where are you? If we're talking about weeks, we would say, how many sales calls did you make last week on average? 2.5 a day on average. Cool. Let's make 3. But I should do 10, right? That's the thing, is like, but I'm supposed to do this many. However, we use the science of hindsight to identify that you have only historically done 2.5. So 3 is a relative improvement. And until you can prove that you've done 3, you are so much more likely to fail shooting for 10, right? Vacillate between chaos and rigidity. If it becomes something that is unattainable, we fail every day and then we give up. So the science of hindsight is forget what everybody said is ideal, forget what that guy does or this lady does. It is looking at your own behavior in the recent past. It's all that matters. We need to change your behavior today and tomorrow relative to what you were doing yesterday. Nothing else matters, right? It's about relative change. Again, relative change means if you exercise 1 day a week or you do phone calls 1 day a week and you go to 2, it's not 1 extra day. That's an absolute number. It's double, which is a significant increase, right? So adding 1 to 1 is a far larger relative change than adding 1 to 5. If you already do it 5 days a week, adding 1 is a much smaller relative change. Is why we can't look at what other people are doing. We have to think of, how are we going to behave relative to how we are behaving now? Does that make sense? It is the only thing that matters. Your plan doesn't matter. None of that matters unless your behavior changes in a way that is sustainable. Does that make sense? And we have Dr. Hobie Wedler here today. So Dr. Wedler is, Hobie is completely blind. And this is a super visual presentation. So I'm gonna do my best to articulate it. Hobie, please let me know how I'm doing. Hobie's a brilliant, he's a chemist, a PhD in chemistry and sensory, he does sensory stuff. So super excited because every time he's here, I know I need to step up my articulation game. All right, so on the screen, should be familiar with this. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay, we are gonna map our behavior modification to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Right? You know, I like structures and history. I want something that has a rigorous history. So this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Get your physiological needs, your safety needs, your belongingness needs, your esteem needs, your self-actualization needs. Now, what needs to happen in Maslow's hierarchy here is they need to be fulfilled in this order to be happy and healthy and happy. Well, happy and healthy. Okay, so you need your physiological needs met first. If those are not being met, nothing else matters. You cannot meet your esteem needs or be self-actualized if you don't have food and water, right? Or shelter. Okay, so these things need to be met and locked in the order from the base up, right? We understand that, right? We need food, water, warmth, and rest. And unless we're getting that, nothing else really matters. It's a pyramid. That is the foundation. If we can have intimate relationships and friends, our belongingness needs met. But if we're not eating, we don't have water, warmth, or rest, those things are going to fall apart. Right? Does that make sense? Drop in the comments, let me know. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, how do we map our goals and our programs and the things we build for our clients to these needs? Because what happens when we get really good at something or when we get motivated, we want to go straight to self-actualization, right? We're like, I kind of want to get control of my finances. And like, boom, okay, what's my budget? Where am I going to invest all this money? How am I going to build my portfolio? It's like, well, do you even like the basics? Do you even know how much money you need to survive consistently? And have you been able to stay there for any appreciable amount of time? Most people say no, but we want to go straight to self-actualization. When people say, hey, I want to get in shape, like, hey, what supplements can I use? Can I sit in a sauna? Okay, blah, 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 blah. Like all this, they're Googling all this complicated stuff. That's the top of the pyramid. And they don't have a foundation. Right? So people come to me all the time looking for like complicated business stuff. And it's like, no, you can't even do the basics every day. Why would you do complicated stuff? Because just like in the pyramid, especially this one, the foundation covers the most amount of volume. Just doing the basics every day will move the needle more than not doing the basics and playing up here at the top. For example, eating appropriately every day, an appropriate amount of food, and doing some kind of movement every day is going to move the needle more than buying all the fancy supplements on Amazon and just taking them. Right? The business basics, market, sell, fulfill, do that every day at a very basic level is going to move the needle more than running Facebook ads if you don't know how to market, sell, and fulfill. Right? But so we always gravitate towards just being top of the pyramid. Huge risk with that. And I'm gonna break down why that creates such a failure. Is because that top of the pyramid, if you haven't stair-stepped into it, is rigid. Like if you just go live with a professional bodybuilder and try to follow the routine, it's going to feel extremely restrictive to you. Doesn't feel restrictive to them. Same with an investor, how Warren Buffett makes decisions. If you just drop in, try to model their behavior, it's going to feel restrictive because you're going from complete chaos to a high level of rigidity. It's going to stress you out. You're going to blow yourself up. Does that make sense? So here's how we do this. Map to Maslow's hierarchy. The first one is we have to identify as granularly as possible what we're trying to achieve. I'm going to use nutrition primarily, but I'll also use some of the examples. I'll read through the examples again. But we got to figure out less about what you want. Okay, this is function over form. Less about what you want. I want a 7-figure business. Well, that could take a million different forms. We got to figure out how you're going to behave in a way that's going to get you there. Nick Smith 2020 will walk you through what that needs to look like, okay, or what I recommend it look like. So step 1 is enough, okay? Enough. So for example, I want to get in shape. I want to get my fitness together. Step 1 is enough. So let's talk about nutrition. How many calories how much food, how many calories do I need to eat? Is calories in, calories out the end all be all? No, but it is the foundation. Like a calorie is a measure of energy, right? If I cannot eat about the same amount of food every day, nothing else is really going to matter. Okay, so enough. And then how many days should I exercise? That's the next question. If I cannot consistently exercise for X amount of days, right, nothing else is going to matter. Doesn't matter how complicated the exercise is or how advanced the routine is if I can't even show up and do it. So as an example, using that as an example, we then go, so that's enough, okay? How much of a thing do I need to do in order to not go backwards? We go back to the science of hindsight, okay? So let's assume you need 2,000 calories and you've going to exercise 3 days a week. You feel like that's a good place to start. Maybe you get it off the internet. Maybe a coach tells you that. It doesn't matter. Here's the thing you got to get through. The plan doesn't matter. It really doesn't. I'll show you why. Okay. So then we go to the science of hindsight, which is the question. Okay, so I've decided 2,000 calories and I've decided 3 days a week. That's my plan. Again, plan doesn't matter. Print one off the internet, get one from your coach, whatever. And then we look back and we say, okay, how many calories did I eat on average last week? And let's say it's 3,500 a day. How many times did I exercise? Once. The week before that, kind of the same thing, right? Now we have a gap. This is what we're doing. Science of hindsight tells us this is our actual behavior and this is where we want to be. We should actually, in my opinion, is what I do for people, stair step into that and provide the evidence that we have earned the right to move up the pyramid. So it would be, all right, next week, I'm going to do 2 days a week of exercise and eat 3,000 calories. And only if I can do that for a week or two in a row, would I stair step into, all right, now I'm going to do 3 days a week and 2,000 calories, right? Because we're only grading ourselves on our own behavior. So you start with the plan, but you don't jump straight into the plan. You micro step into it based on the science of hindsight, okay? Does that make sense? You start where you're at and you micro step into the baseline. So enough. Right, so we have enough. Until, let's say you do video marketing or you want to start doing video marketing and you're terrified of video, right? So some coach says, hey, you have to do 3 videos a week, for this to really work, 3 videos a week. Cool, well, you do 0 and you got to get to 3. Nothing else matters, only enough is the hardest thing to get right, is just the amount of time or the amount of stuff, okay? So you say, okay, I'm doing none right now, and my coach wants me to do 3, or this program wants to do 3, or I decided that 3, for whatever reason, 3 is the right amount. Right away, I would do 1. Prove that you could do 1 a week. And if you can do 1 a week, boom, go to 2. And only if you can do 2 a week, you go to 3. And now after you do 3, you've accomplished enough, right? Now we just got to lock that in as a habit. Now, if you plan on doing 2 and you don't do 2, you don't beat yourself up and try to push to 3. You explore why. Why didn't I do 2? And you just address those until you can do 2, right? The only thing that matters, this is the hardcore people that like to grind their face off. Don't agree with me here. All that matters is that you change your behavior in a way that is sustainable. That's it. Okay, and then 3, boom, that's enough. We have now accomplished enough. Now we just do 3 videos every week, okay? Or we eat this much food every week, or we exercise this much every week. Only when our behavior, the science of hindsight, tells us that we have done the plan, not that we printed off and looked at it and tried, that we've actually done it. And if we're not doing it, if we're not inching towards it, we start exploring why. And we start addressing those issues. Well, I'm really nervous on camera. Okay, what can I do to, maybe you practice off camera, maybe you fire up a live in a small group, right? Like we start deconstructing the beliefs that are preventing us from behaving in the way that we have chosen we want to behave. Does that make sense? So we got enough. What's the bare minimum you need to do? We go bare minimum, not maximum. What's the bare minimum you need to do? And where are you at now? And then systematically close that gap. Okay, does that make sense? Drop in the chat, let me know. I'm zooming through this. That's it. Modify your behavior. Stair step into it. We can always change enough later on. The next step is balance. Now that we have enough, so let's say calories or exercise. Remember, this is behavior modification. So, okay, cool. I went to the gym 3 days a week and I ate 2,000 calories every day. I actually modified my behavior in a way that is sustainable, right? And there's evidence. The science of hindsight tells me I can do this. Then we go to balance. Balance is kind of the distribution of these things. So now maybe we could say, all right, well, I want to do upper body once and lower body once and full body another time. Or just adding a little bit of complication, like the distribution of, now that we actually show up and do the thing we're supposed to do, we can change the distribution a little bit. It would also be, okay, enough. Now that I can eat this many calories, I also have to eat this many calories, but get at least 180 grams of protein. It's a tiny added complication, right? And until you can do it consistently, nothing else matters. A lot of nutrition programs go straight to like, here, eat these macros. And people do it like 20% of the time because they haven't developed skills, right? So balance is then, how does this need to be distributed? Okay, look, I finally made 3 videos. That's enough. There's evidence I can do that. Now I want one that is funny and I'll keep the other 2 the same, right? And then you make a funny video. You're just changing the distribution, the balance of what you're doing, okay? Until you can do that consistently, nothing else matters. That we just spend our time working through the beliefs that are preventing us from the balance of the thing that we need to do. Okay. So look at science of hindsight. And we say, all right, well, now I'm exercising and I'm eating consistently and I'm making 3 videos every day. Now, there's going to be something that I want. Like maybe I want a little bit different food source. Maybe I need to get a little bit more protein. Maybe these videos, I got to get a little bit better at a call to action at the end, right? It's just, we're just taking the time. We already have the habit of doing the thing. We just have to change the way that time is distributed. Okay, does that make sense? And I'll walk you through this. I'm trying to get through the basics quickly. So now we have enough. And balance. So this would be, all right, I eat the same number of calories every day. I figured that out. I also eat the same number of calories with at least X amount of protein, which is more than most people could ever say. They might take all the supplements and they might try really hard 5 days of the week, but the other 2, they go more backwards. They take more steps backwards than they do forwards during the week. Okay. So enough, and then balance. Now structure. Okay. This is where we use the science of hindsight and we say, okay, can we lock this in? Most people, this is the mistake most people make. They go, I have these goals, and they plug it in their calendar. And we have no idea if those are even good times or not. We just make it up and then like swim upstream trying to make it happen. So now we have balance. Back to food. Same number of calories. Cool. I got a pretty good idea what that feels like. I've been doing it for 6 or 7 weeks now. It's just something I do. And I also have the balance. I'm getting enough protein, the carbohydrates and fat. You can also manipulate that if you want. Right, but now structure. Could I pick 2 or 3, use the science of hindsight, are there 2 or 3 or 4 times a day, like natural deadlines, that I can just put those meals so I don't have to think about it anymore? All right, so I wake up, I could have breakfast, and then I have lunch, and then before I go to the gym, and then after I go to the gym. Okay, so you just, boom, those are the times I'm gonna eat. Now that we have done this, we can use the science of hindsight to identify the best times that are the most likely to be sustainable. We don't make the shit up, okay? Same thing, is there a best time? You can go look back and say, okay, is there a best time to go live? Now that I have this skill and it's a habit of mine, is there a best time to go live? Is there a best time to make a video? Is there a best time to exercise for me based on my life? Science of hindsight, right? How do we make this sustainable so that my behavior continues to improve instead of every day feeling like you're swimming upstream with these super strict random ass plans and goals and strategies? Okay, so we have enough, we have balance, we have structure. Again, we use the science of hindsight. We look back and we look for opportunities like keystones to structure the things that we're working on. First thing in the morning, right before bed, at lunchtime. We can now lock these things in because we've gotten the habit of doing enough. It's not like super stressful to do 3 videos anymore. There's evidence in our behavior, right? We're not making it up. There's evidence that we can do this thing. Okay. So now we have enough, balance, and structure. Novelty. Novelty. This is, all right, so I figured out how to eat the same amount of food every day. I get enough protein, so my carbs and my fats are also, within range there. And most of the time, I can put it on autopilot. I can just, it takes zero cognitive load. There's zero cognitive load now to reach my goals because I put this on autopilot, right? And structure is part of that. But, I would really like to go out and like have some drinks with my friends and eat some cookies and shit like that. Right? That's novelty. Now, how do we make this process enjoyable? So novelty in nutrition, you say, okay, so you have enough and balance, structure. Well, why don't we just, now that we have a structure, why don't we just get rid of your lunch and replace those calories with wine and cheese? Right? And then we wait and we see what happens. No guilt, no shame. We just wait and see. You might gain a little bit of weight, be a little bit bloated the next day, then your weight comes back down. And now you have evidence that you know how to go out, be a responsible adult, drink some wine, eat some cheese, and not knock yourself off track, right? So this is where we learn how to have fun with what we're doing without compromising the other things. You cannot start with novelty because if you don't have this number for enough, the balance and the structure, you won't know how to get back on track quickly. You're either on or you're off. When the reality is there's a gray area where you can have some cake, have some brownies, drink some beer, and you're still on track. Right? Novelty. If you're making videos, you say, I think it'd be really funny if I made this kind of parody video. Cool. Work it into the structure. And what we have, now we have the evidence and we have a baseline. So you can do fun stuff. And what happens when we do fun stuff and we feel like it's going against our goals is we get guilty and we feel shameful and we sabotage. But we've built the structure so we can have fun stuff, step back and compare, okay, this is when we did the fun stuff. This is the baseline. I actually didn't go backwards. No more guilt and shame. Right? We've eliminated guilt and shame, which is a doom loop that knocks people off track. Again, I'm zooming through this. So you step into having some fun. You say, I'd like to have at least 2 nights where it's almost a mini pyramid in itself. I'd like to have 2 nights where me and my husband or me and my wife can just go out. I don't have to worry about it. Great. Start with 1 night. Prove that you can do that responsibly. Wait for the data to come in, right? Sales data, weight on the scale, whatever, and go, all right, well, if I do this once, this is the consequence. Guess what? You're a fucking adult. You can choose that consequence. What you can't do is be confused by it, right? So if I go out twice, so you start with once, work to twice, and then you understand based on having this pyramid in place, if I go out Saturday and Sunday night, these are the consequences. And I'm an adult, I can make that trade if I want, right? That's novelty. You can choose to do this. What you don't get to do is wake up the next morning and be confused and frustrated and throw your hands up in the air, right? This is why we stair step using Maslow's hierarchy, is we're actually giving you the power to choose the consequences and understand the trade-offs. Does that make sense? You're much less likely to blow yourself up when you can choose the trade-offs versus you just make them unknowingly and then you're confused why nothing works. You say, F it, this plan sucks, and fall off a wagon, and then you wait till next year, right? So that's novelty. Enough, balance, structure, novelty. Last one is complicated stuff. This is supplements. This is like timing your nutrients. This is super advanced marketing. This is even things like Facebook ads. These are things that don't really move the needle if you don't have a foundation in place. And the returns are severely diminished. Severely diminished returns, meaning the exact way that you exercise, right? Exactly what every single muscle is doing is what bodybuilders do. That's not going to move the needle as much as just showing up and doing something every day, right? So complicated stuff, people think complicated means better, but the reality is the more complicated, the more diminished the returns. Now, diminished returns are still returns. So if you are an Olympic athlete and you got to time your sleep and sleep in an oxygen chamber and all those things, that's complicated stuff. But that 1% might be the difference between silver and gold. If you're just starting and you're trying to develop new habits, complicated stuff is not going to help you. This is what makes people throw up their hands and quit. But this is where we go, self-actualization, right? I'm going to go straight into the most complicated program with the best supplements and the best trainers and the best coaches, and I'm going to run the best ads and write the best copy. And like none of that matters if you can't consistently do the fundamentals, right? Does that make sense? So then if it's appropriate, we micro-step in the last 2%. Where are we at? Where do we want to be? So I did this complicated thing 3 days this week. I want to do it every day. So the next week you would do 4. And only if your behavior suggests you can do it, the next week you do 5. And then only if your behavior suggests you could do it, the next week you do 6. I'm going to tell you why this is so important, because a lot of you are going to want to jump straight to every day. Okay. The reason this is so important is you can find your highest quality of life and sustainability when you throw your arbitrary goals out the window and modify your behavior. We do need goals. We need something to aim for. But if we stair step this way, right? Enough, balance, structure, novelty, complicated stuff. And each one of these has a micro step in the middle, right? So for example, let's say, there we go, right? So each has a micro step in the middle. We're going to find our highest quality life and sustainability. Here's why. Let's say I think getting in shape is going to make me happy, or I think making $400,000 a month is what I need to be happy. If we jump straight to self-actualization, even if we make it there, we are not going to be as happy as we could possibly be. Why? Because we're all different. We're not robots. So let's say I start at 1 day a week, is what I'm exercising, and I go to 2, and I get evidence I can do that. And I go to 3, I get evidence. I go to 4, evidence, 5, evidence, 6, evidence, 7, evidence. So it takes me 7 weeks to get there. But now it's a habit. I do the same thing with nutrition. I do the same thing with my business. And then I build, go back to this here, right? And then I build the balance in, right? So this kind of macros, this kind of videos, this kind of sales calls, this kind of marketing. And I build a structure around it so that every day I'm doing about the same thing at about the same time. And then I work in some really fun stuff, right? I say, hey, I really want to eat some ice cream and drink some beer and so on and so forth. And I micro step into it. Here's what happens. Even if you reach the very, very top, remember those returns are diminished. You now have the experience, and your clients have the experience and evidence as to where they are happiest. You might go through the whole thing because you're type A and you're super motivated. You eat you weigh your food to the gram, eat the exact same amount of macros, and then you structure it to 5 meals at exactly these times, and then you work in some a date night, and then you start taking supplements, just like and sleeping in a freaking oxygen chamber, all these things. What most people realize only if they walk through this process is, you know what? I'm totally happy I mastered all of this. Like, my business is at $400,000 a month. I'm doing all this stuff, but actually I was happiest when it was at $320,000 a month and I was on this level of the pyramid. If you do not allow yourself or others to use the science of hindsight and micro-step into what you think your behavior should be, and then get evidence, you rob yourself and your clients of the ability to find out where they are happiest and what is most sustainable for them, their personality, and their unique disposition. Does that make sense? This is all about getting what you actually want, closing the gap. It is not about being strict in a plan, especially if you don't have evidence or experience in all the steps that are in between where you're at and the plan you've been given. Right, so yes, there's behavior modification. We're building habits, but we're also giving us this, like, people will vacillate between chaos and rigidity, meaning I don't want to exercise, right? Or they've never exercised and they go hardcore bodybuilder and their life is miserable because they're not making connections with friends. They're tired all the time. If you eat a certain way and say, you know what, this is overrated, F it. I liked my life before. And that's all they know. Most people only know chaos and rigidity. That is why they yo-yo diet. They don't have a weight loss problem. Look at their history. They have a maintainability problem. They do not modify their behavior in a structured way to identify the ground where they're happiest and is the most sustainable. Does that make sense? I went through a lot there. But that's everybody's goals. Yes, I achieved it. Like, we're checking off these boxes and we're more confused than ever. And we're not as happy as we would hope we would be. In fact, we might even be worse off. And our experience, our real contact with reality says, I was happier doing this than I am doing this. And all we can do is slide all the way back to here because we haven't modified our behavior according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs and micro-stepped in and got the evidence as to what is my life like when I exercise 2 days a week. All right, what is it like when I exercise 3? All right, what is it like when I exercise 4? Oh, well, I meant to do 4, but I didn't make it. So I'll try 4 again. Oh, nope, didn't make it again. Cool, maybe I should just exercise 3 days a week. Eliminate the guilt and shame of not succeeding. Like, maybe you should just exercise 3 days a week, right? And then you pile on eating a little bit better with the same method. You pile on walking. You pile on sleeping, or you use the same thing for sleeping, and you just build the most sustainable, highest quality of life that you can sustain. And over time, right, you may be able to add a 4th day of exercise, but not right now. All it's going to do by trying to push more exercise is going to make you more likely to quit altogether because you've only experienced complete chaos or complete rigidity. Does that make sense? So this is how we build programs. This is how I build programs. I'll walk you through it one more time. And again, I'm going to run into a time crunch here. Enough. How much of a thing do I actually need to do? Okay. And if I believe, for whatever reason, it's 4, and I'm only doing 1, I have to prove that I can do 2. And only after I have proven in the real world, in contact with reality, will I move to 3. And then only when my behavior has modified so that I do 3, I move to 4. And then once that's locked in, because 4 is the number we set, might take 4, 5, 6 weeks to get there. Who cares? We're modifying our behavior every time. We are making a positive improvement, a positive relative change, right? The number on the paper doesn't matter. Your behavior changing is what matters. And then 4, and then we move up to balance. Okay, now you can start worrying about what you actually do when you're in the gym. You can start worrying about like, you know, maybe I should work this muscle or that muscle or cardio here or exercise there. Until you can go to the gym 4 days a week consistently, it doesn't matter, right? So only when the evidence is there that you can do the minimum, you move up a level. Same thing, science of hindsight. Okay, where am I at? Where do I want to be? Do it, get evidence, do it, get evidence, do it, get evidence. And then only when the evidence suggests you can do the thing you planned, do you move up another level to structure. And then another one to novelty. How can I start having fun with this? Only when you've shown that you know how to have fun without blowing yourself up or going backwards or getting a cycle of guilt and shame, do you have permission to go to complicated stuff. More than likely what's going to happen is somewhere in the middle. This is the duality. This is why people suck at being happy. Somewhere in the middle, you're going to go, well, I look pretty good and I feel really good. And I'm actually the happiest I've ever been. And you might decide it's not worth taking that next step because it's added complication and diminished returns. And you would be right. For you, you shouldn't take the next step. Most of you will because you have this goal. And this goal, what it does, it gets you to your happiest place, but we don't recognize it because we don't have this process. And then it pulls you out of the happiest place. And then you get to the top. And if you haven't been cognizant of this process, or you haven't gone through it, you get to the top, you say, F it, you blow up, you start over. Does that sound familiar to anybody? It's how I build programs. Part of it is right thing at the right time. It's behavior modification, and built into it is permission to do what makes you feel, look the best, be the happiest. And it's going to be somewhere in the middle. It's always somewhere in the middle, unless you are an Olympic athlete, pro athlete. Even then, pro athletes, you know, like there's a lot of pro athletes that are known for doing dumb stuff, like going out and drinking during the season. There's a point where you're the happiest. And if you don't go through this process, you will fail. You may not think you fail because you said by this date, I want to achieve this. And you actually check that box, but then everything falls apart after that. So you might consider it a win, but this is what yo-yo dieters do. They look at their list of wins. Look at this. I reached all my resolutions. And they're the same or worse than when they started, right? So let's talk about, so Mark says, I finished all SOPs for business. It's been 20 years and it hasn't happened. Cool. So we back into that. How many SOPs did you write? Or how many SOPs did you finish last week? If it's 0, do 1 next week. That's it. And then do it again. Now, if you want to figure out, well, hey, I got to do 5 a week, or I got to do 10 a week in order to get this done. Cool. We stair step into 10 a week and then we put it on autopilot. And then we go to balance. Balance would then be, all right, now that I do 10 SOPs a week, let's focus on which ones I should be doing, right? Which ones are high leverage, which ones are low leverage. But until you have the habit of doing it, it's not going to matter, right? And then we move to structure, right? What time, you look back, science of hindsight. All right, well, I've mostly had the most energy and clarity to do this in the morning and at lunchtime. Cool. So now we're going to do 10 a week. We're going to do this kind, and we're going to block off time in the morning and block off time at lunch, because evidence tells us that's where we're most likely to get it done. We don't make shit up, right? Science of hindsight. You lock that in. Novelty. Can you have fun with it? I don't know. Find a way. You don't necessarily have to, but can you make it more entertaining? Can you make a game out of it? Can you gamify it? Get your team involved? Try that. If that ends up being distracting, maybe not, right? But we have to know. We have to get the evidence. And then complicated stuff. Complicated stuff would be like getting it all in a sauna and automated with dependencies and all this stuff, right? So you just push a button, everything happens the way it's supposed to. But that won't matter if you don't make them. You see how that works? Mark, hopefully that was helpful. Yep. Chantel says, I was so happy when I made 15 grand a month. Then I made a lot more too fast. I hated everything. Yep. Nothing more dangerous than skipping a whole bunch of being like Maslow's hierarchy, right? In a finance would be like, hey, I made $10,000. Now I'm going to invest in this portfolio, right? Which is self-actualization. You can't just skip all the middle ones. You can try. It's not going to work. Hopefully that makes sense. That's how I build stuff. It is science of hindsight, evidence, right? So we got where we are and where we want to be, right? Science of hindsight tells us where we are. We micro step into where we want to be, because where we want to be requires behavior change, which means we actually have to have evidence that we can do this. If we cannot provide evidence that we can exercise 4 days a week, we keep doing 3 and we just can't do the 4th one, then take that off the plan. It's causing more harm than good sitting here beating yourself up because you're not doing it. Take it off the plan so that the plan matches your behavior, move up the pyramid, right? That's how I build everything. So people ask me, they'll throw stuff at me, say, hey, I got this, I got this, I got this, I got this. And I'll say, hey, yeah, just do this every day. Like, well, how did you make it so simple? It worked. I made so much money. I'm doing less work. And it's just a process of identifying, like, hey, well, what is the thing? Like, if this doesn't happen, nothing else matters. Is this happening consistently? No. Then if we make this happen consistently, our life is going to improve more than if we try to do all this other stuff, right? Once this is locked in, we can make further improvement. The returns are diminished a tiny bit, but diminished returns are still returns, right? And we find the point where the diminished returns are no longer worth the time, effort, complication based on your happiness, not based on what anybody else fucking says. I don't care what anybody else says. Where are you happiest? What's worth it to you? Where you're trying to be? And it seems almost like people are like, well, it's going to take forever. But the reality is, if you picked 3 things, exercise, your relationship, and fitness, business, nutrition, dog training, right? You took 3 things and you walk up through this process. Halfway through the year, you will have 3 new habits for the rest of your life that are going to compound into results other people can't even believe. It's going to take maybe 6 months, which might seem like a lot, but think about your last resolutions. Think about the resolutions from 5 years ago. You still haven't got there, right? So this is the process of locking it in, and it creates a compounding growth, because for me, fitness, exercise, business, I could basically do nothing. I just do the things on autopilot and they all improve, right? For years, 10 years now. And that's what I try to give my clients. It's not sexy. They want complicated stuff. But if you want to reach your goals and you want to help your clients reach your goals, this is how I recommend you kind of structure your programs. And, even it doesn't matter what kind of program you have, what kind of software you sell, what kind of widget you sell, there is something that your client needs to do consistently. And if they don't do this consistently, nothing else will matter. So the very first thing I would teach the client is how to do this thing consistently. I would stair step them in. Don't worry about all this other stuff until you do this every day or every week or whatever it is. Nothing else will matter. And then only once they have proof that they could do that would I reveal and introduce the next step. And only once they can prove they do that do we reveal and introduce the next step. Your clients will be more successful in a more sustainable way than anybody else out there. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, let me know. Drop them in the group. That's my behavior modification. I use that to process everything. As a single parent, yep. So Brittany, I'll answer this. As a single parent, I'm not a single parent. You are. It's simply bumpersbook.com. Okay. Let me share my last slide here. My book will actually show you how to do this. Bumpersbook.com if you want digital, Nick Peterson book if you want Amazon. We first have to, with something like this, we have to recapture our time first. We have to audit and recapture. So if you'll notice you spend like, maybe 3 hours a week just refreshing Facebook. Stop, recapture that time, spend it with your kids. But once we've recaptured our time and reallocated it, we say, all right, well, we're spending an hour a day with our kids and we'd like to spend 2 hours a day. Right? We step into it. Can you do an hour a day? Until you do that, nothing else matters. You got to find a way to maneuver things to an hour a day and then an hour and a half. And once you do that, you go to 2 hours, right? It'll be fragile if you do something else. If you just wake up tomorrow and you're like, I'm going to spend 3 hours a day with my kids no matter what, it's going to cause so much stress and anxiety and constriction. And you haven't quite figured out how to behave in a way that allows it yet. And you're going to blow up and say, F it, this will never work. I'll just go back to doing what I was doing, right? So recapture your time, reallocate it, and then average it out. Meaning, instead of 1 hour one day and 2 the next and 1 the next and 5 the next, can we just get a consistent 1.5 a day? That makes it a little bit more manageable. Does Bumpers have an ebook version? Yep, bumpersbook.com. I just rewrote it. So if you buy it from bumpersbook.com, you'll get the old digital version, but I will send you the new one probably within 48 hours. Okay. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Any questions, please let me know. Bumpersbook.com or nickpetersonbook.com. Amazon will ship it to you. And share your biggest takeaways in the Facebook group.